In the last lesson, we saw the healing of a lame man at the pool of Bethsaida. He had been lame for nearly 4 decades. Jesus told him to pick up his bed and walk, and the Jewish leaders were upset when they saw him. They wanted to know who had told him to pick up his bed and walk, but the man did not even know that it was Jesus. And afterwards, we saw that Jesus found him in the temple and said to him, "See, you have been made well. Sin no more, lest a worse thing come upon you." Just like the Samaritan woman, Jesus confronted him with his sin. And we see that the man departed, and he told the religious leaders that it was Jesus who made him well. You want the name of the one who told me to pick up my bed and walk? His name is Jesus. And what we saw is for this reason the Jews persecuted Jesus, those religious leaders. And they sought to kill him because he had done these things on the Sabbath. Right? In John chapter 2, right, when Jesus was in the temple, we saw the religious leaders were questioning Jesus. But now a shift has been made from questioning him to persecuting him, harassing him, being hostile towards him. And the reason was because he had told this man to pick up his bed and walk. But Jesus answered them and said, "My Father has been working until now, and I have been working." So first off, he said, "My Father." Right? We say our Father all the time. When you look at the book of Psalms, even in the poetic books, right, you do not find one reference of God being our Father. Right? He says he's Father of the fatherless, but continuously points out the separation between God and man. But Jesus is now saying, "My Father," saying he has a special relationship between him and God that is different than anyone else. It is different from their relationship to God. And he said, "My Father has been working." We talked about in the last lesson, does God work on the Sabbath? Yes, he keeps the sun lit and he keeps the earth spinning. Numerous Old Testament talks about how God works all the time. Right? The sun goes up, the sun goes down, rain falls, the grass grows, right? The cattle still are being fed. God works on the Sabbath. And God had created for 6 days, and on the Sabbath day, he rested. Does that mean, though, that God did nothing, that he got in his hammock and forgot about everything? Well, to some degree, God works all the time maintaining the universe. And on the Sabbath, he rested from creation, from the work that he had done. And Jesus says that just as God works on the Sabbath, he says, "I also work on the Sabbath." And everyone understood what he's talking about. Right? God has work that he needs to do on the Sabbath. Jesus is saying, "I have work also." And just as the justification for God working is for the benefit of man, right? The Father does it. So Jesus is saying, because the Father does it, I need to do it as well. And my justification is the Father. Right? If I was to walk into the jailhouse and say, "Let this prisoner go," the first question would be asked, why? And I could say, the president grants immunity all the time, so I am granting immunity as well. So they would say, "Well, you're not the president." But what am I doing? I am acting like I am equal to the president. When Jesus says that God works on the Sabbath, and his justification for working on the Sabbath is that God does it, right? He is putting himself equal with God. And the Jews understood exactly what he was saying. Therefore, they sought to kill him all the more. Because not only now has he broken the Sabbath, but he's also said that God was his Father, and he was making himself equal with God. Now it's changed from hostility, persecuting, harassment. right? To now they think Jesus should be put to death. Not only was he a Sabbath breaker, but he was a blasphemer, right? Death was the only penalty in the Old Testament for blasphemy. Isaiah 44, I am the first, I am the last, besides me there is no God. I mean, this is just one of the many Old Testament passages that say that there is one God. Now Jesus is saying he is equal with God. God number 2. Well, what they did not understand is there is one God, but with Father and Son in an eternal relationship making up God. And Jesus answered and said to them, most assuredly I say to you, the Son can do nothing of himself but what he sees the Father do. For whatever he does, the Son does also in a like manner. So he provides an illustration, right? The things that sons do, they learn from their fathers. They imitate their fathers. They do what they see their fathers do, and they learn and they do the same things. He says, for the Father loves the Son, and he shows him all things that he himself does. Right? Key point here, the Father loves the Son. There is a strong bond between this Father and Son. And there is nothing that the Father does that he has not shown the Son. And he will show him greater things than these, that you may marvel. I'm getting ready to do greater things than what you have just seen. Greater things than healing a boy on the verge of death that is 20 miles away. The healing of a man who could not walk for 38 years. Well, what greater works than these could Jesus do for them to marvel at? He says, for as the Father raises the dead and gives life to them, even so the Son gives life to whom he wills. So he says, just as God can raise the dead and God can give life, he has taught the Son how to give life. And the Son will grant life as he sees fit. For the Father judges no one, but he has committed all judgment to the Son. The Father judges nobody. He has given that authority over. He has turned over to the Son to decide who comes under judgment. The power of life and death, right? The two go hand in hand. Well, why has the Father given the Son these even greater works to do? The power over deciding who lives and who faces judgment. What he says is that all should honor the Son just as they honor the Father. He who does not honor the Son does not honor the Father who sent him. So what he's clearly saying is the Father is to be honored. And what he also says is that the Son is to be honored because he does exactly what the Father does. So much so that if you do not honor the Son, you do not honor the Father. I mean, it makes us think about what is said in Isaiah 42, verse 8. I am the Lord, that is my name, and my glory I will not give to another. Right? God repeatedly says, I will not share my glory with another. Nobody gets glory but me. But now here is Jesus, and he is demanding, honor the Son as you honor the Father. And if you do not honor the Son, you can't honor the Father. Well, how can that be true? Unless in some way that the Son and the Father from the beginning were side by side. And the definition of God in the Old Testament was actually a Father and Son in unison. And to honor both is what it means to honor God. And Jesus is saying, if you do not honor him, that you are then not honoring God. And this is what the Jewish nation is now confronted with. And the decision that they have to make about who Jesus is. And this will determine their relationship with God. He says, most assuredly, I say to you, He who hears my words and believes in him who sent me has everlasting life, and shall not come into judgment, but has passed from death into life. So why should we be listening to what he is saying? Because the words of Jesus determine life or death. Believing his words, believing in the one who sent him. And this will determine whether you have eternal life or if you're going to face the judgment. He says, most assuredly, I say to you, the hour is coming, and now is, when the dead will hear the voice of the Son of God, and those who hear will live. The words and the voice of the Son of God are so powerful that just as he can give life to the physically dead, his words can give life to the spiritually dead. And the time is now for the spiritually dead to hear his voice. And by his words, they will have life. By his words, they can be born again. For as the Father has life in himself, so he has granted the Son to have life in himself. And he has given him authority to execute judgment because he is the Son of Man. He's talking about being the Son of God. But now he says he is the Son of Man. Right? He's in this unique position of being both God and man. A unique position to be a judge. He can understand God's commandments, but he can also understand our weaknesses and our temptations. Remember, we saw in Daniel chapter 7, one like the Son of Man, who rides through the clouds and is presented before the Ancient of Days, and to him is given dominion, authority, glory, honor, and a kingdom. Right? The authority to pass judgment on all of the citizens. I have been given the right of judgment because I am the Son of Man that Daniel had prophesied. Do not marvel at this, for the hour is coming. Right? Not now, but in the future. The hour will come in which all who are in the graves will hear his voice, and they will come forth. Right? He says everyone will be raised, and when they are, one of two things are going to happen. Those that have done good will be raised to a resurrection of life. Those who have done evil will be raised to a resurrection of condemnation. The choice that Jesus will make as judge is based on, do you accept and respond to his words? He says, I can do of myself nothing. As I hear, I judge, and my judgment is righteous, because I do not seek my own, but the will of the Father who sent me. He says, I can do nothing on my own. Everything I do is not about my will. I am doing the will of the Father who sent me. Well, what does it mean then to be a Christian? To be Christ-like? Right? It means you're no longer seeking your will, but every part of your life is around pleasing God, pleasing Christ. Easy to understand, hard to follow. For Jesus, it was so hard that he wept and he agonized in the garden. And what he's telling us is it's going to be hard for us as well, but he's saying that if you do it, it's worth it. And it's worth it forever. Jesus is demanding that they accept a lot. And what follows is almost like a courtroom proceeding. He says, if I bear witness of myself, my witness is not true. Now, Jesus is not saying his testimony is false. But what he's saying is that if I was the only one saying this, well, then they should reject it. And what was the standard in the Old Testament? If someone was going to try to establish a fact based on testimony alone, would their testimony be enough? And the answer is no. In fact, what we saw is it would require at least 2 to 3 witnesses. Deuteronomy chapter 19, one witness shall not rise against a man concerning any iniquity or any sin that he commits, but by the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses the matter shall be established. And Jesus says, there is another who bears witness of me, and I know that the witness which he witnesses of me is true. So we see that Jesus has an ultimate witness that he is going to call upon. And there's no more reliable witness than the Father. And this is really the only testimony that matters. So what he says is, you have sent to John. Remember in chapter 1, it was the Pharisees that sent men to John. And he says, and he bore witness to the truth. Yet I do not receive testimony from man, but I say these things that you may be saved. He was the burning and shining light, that you were willing for a time to rejoice in his light. Well, what was the testimony that John gave? He said, I have seen and testified that this is the Son of God. He says, now you all accepted him, at least for a while, as a prophet. But Jesus says, I don't need the testimony of John, but I am providing it for your benefit, that perhaps you will believe him, and as a result of that, be saved. He says, John the Baptist was not the light, but he was a lamp, a vehicle by which all could see the true light, to focus the attention on the light. And as great as the testimony of John the Baptist was, Jesus immediately dismissed it. And he says, I have a greater witness than John's. For the works which the Father has given me to finish, the very works that I do, bear witness of me, that the Father has sent me. He says, I have provided John the Baptist as a witness, but greater than the testimony of any man are the works that I do. They provide a witness that the Father has sent me. I heal a lame man. It means that the Father has sent me. And the Father himself who sent me has testified of me. And you have neither heard his voice at any time, nor seen his form. He says the Father has given testimony. Right? Well, would the Father allow him to be doing these works if he was not speaking the truth? And the answer to that is no. So he says, as he continues to do these things, it is stating that the Father has sent me. The Father is giving his testimony, approval that what he is saying is true. We also know that the Father gave his testimony at Jesus' baptism. We know he gave it at the Transfiguration. This is my beloved Son. But he says, you have neither heard his voice nor seen his form. Now, this was a fact that they all knew from the Old Testament. In Exodus 33, right, God had told Moses, right, you cannot see my face, for no man can see me and live. But then, what about Exodus 20? Right, as God is speaking directly to Moses and all of the people, and Moses records the accounts, Moses recounts this in Deuteronomy. He said, you heard his words, right? But you didn't see his form. You only heard a voice. Israel did not see his form. They did not see him. However, they did hear his voice. But Jesus says, this generation of Israelites, you have never heard his voice. You're different from those people. They listened to God. He says, you have never listened to God. You're different from those people. He also says that you do not have his word abiding in you, because whom he sent, him you do not believe. Jesus now is making a very strong connection between listening to God and the scriptures. He says, you have never heard God, because his voice does not abide in you. Right? If you were listening to God, then you would be following his written word, But he says, you are not listening to God. He says, you search the scriptures, for in them you think you have eternal life, and these are they which testify of me. Right? He says, you will scour through the scriptures. You will come up with the strictest definition of what God must have meant when he said to remember the Sabbath. And they think that they can unlock the magic formula, and that if they follow step by step, the result is, as a result of that, they will get eternal life. What Jesus says is the purpose of those scriptures were to lead them to him. And it is through him that they can find eternal life. But they're not liking what the scriptures reveal. He says, you are not willing to come to me, that you may have life. He says, you can read the scriptures, but you are rejecting what they are telling you. Remember the movie, The Christmas Story? Ralphie gets the decoder ring from the radio show and he starts decoding the secret message. Positive, it unlocks the secrets of the universe. And he decodes it painstakingly, letter by letter, waiting to see what it reveals. And the message is, be sure to drink your Ovaltine. And Ralphie is crushed. That was not what he was looking for. And Jesus was not what they were looking for either. They were unwilling to accept what the scriptures were revealing. So they just want to somehow scramble it back up and start over. Jesus is saying their purpose of the scriptures was to reveal and bear witness that he is the Son of God. And they were waiting for it in anticipation. And Jesus says that he is not doing anything in order to receive praise from men. He says, I do not receive honor from men, right? I'm trying to be pleasing to God. I am not trying to make men happy. But he says, I know you. Remember John chapter 2, right? Jesus knew what was in their hearts. And he says, I know you, that you do not have the love of God in you. Pleasing God was not what was motivating them. He says, I have come in my Father's name, and you do not receive me. If another one comes in my name, you will receive him. Right? A pretend Messiah will come along, and he'll say pleasant things to make you happy. And you're more than willing to listen to him. What is the root of the issue? He says, how can you believe? He says, it is impossible for you to believe who receive honor from one another and do not seek the honor that comes from the only God. Their problem was peer pressure. They're too busy praising each other about how good they are, that they're not listening to God about who Jesus is. Well, we'll see later on in John chapter 12 that even among the rulers, many believed in him, but because of the Pharisees, they would not confess him, lest they be put out of the synagogues. They were too concerned about their peers and pleasing them than trying to listen to God, and as a result of that, they were not willing to listen to what Jesus was telling them. Even though what he was telling them involved what they needed to understand to make decisions that will impact them for eternity. Do you have the love of God abiding in you? Are you going to follow him above all else? Or are you going to surrender to make your friends happy and receive praise from each other? And it is the decisions you make now, he's telling them, that will determine whether you are resurrected to eternal life or eternal judgment. And these people are not willing to put their faith in Jesus. They were entrusting it with someone else instead. He says, do not think that I shall accuse you to the Father. Right? I will not have to accuse you before the Father. There is someone else who will accuse you to the Father. He says, Moses, in whom you trust. This is the one that you're clinging to. What you're going to see is Moses is going to be the one that will actually accuse you before the Father. He says, "For if you believed Moses, you would believe me, for he wrote about me." And in Deuteronomy 18, Moses writes about how God said that I will raise up for them a prophet like you from among the brethren. And it shall be that whoever will not hear my words, which I speak in my name, I will require it of him. Right? That there would be another one that would come, that would be like Moses, a prophet like Moses, a lawgiver. Right? Not just someone who says, observe Moses' law, but instead a prophet who was a lawgiver. And when that person comes along, you are to stop listening to Moses and you will listen to him, and it will be required that you listen to him. And he says that if you do not believe his writings, then how will you believe my words? And I don't think he's necessarily here talking about just one particular verse. But what he says is, go back and look at everything that Moses wrote. In each and every one of his books, the purpose of everything that he wrote was to lead you to understand who Jesus was and that you should follow him. He says, you search the scriptures, for in them you think you have eternal life. But these scriptures are the scriptures that testify about me. And he says, you are not willing to come to me that you may live.